the first of the stars. In the sprawling universe, filled with vibrant planets and enigmatic civilizations, few places were as harsh and uninviting as Xeno's prime. The sun beat down mercilessly on its barren landscape, where rolling dunes stretched endlessly beneath a sky painted with swirling purple clouds. Amidst this desolate beauty, Jax Rogan, a roguish human smuggler, found himself landing his battered ship, the Stellar Rogue, for what he thought would be a routine drop-off. Little did he know, fate had something extraordinary in store for him. As Jax stepped off his ship, the heat enveloped him like a suffocating blanket. He shielded his eyes against the glare, scanning the horizon for signs of life. It was then he spotted her, a stunning humanoid alien woman kneeling beside a pair of pitiful creatures, her golden hair shimmering like sunlight on water. Jax had seen many strange things in his travels, but nothing could prepare him for the sight of her desperate blue eyes filled with tears, pleading for help. The creatures, resembling oversized blue lions, lay lifeless on the scorching sand, their soft fur dulled by thirst. Jax's heart tugged at the sight. He wasn't one to rush into heroics. After all, he was a smuggler, not a savior. But something about the alien woman's plight ignited a spark of compassion within him. He took a step closer, his instincts fighting against the temptation to ignore the scene before him. "Hey there, sweetheart," he called out, flashing what he hoped was his most charming smile. "Looks like you could use a hand." The alien woman looked up, startled. Her lashes, glistening with unshed tears, blinked in disbelief. "Please, my darlings are dying. They need water." Her melodic voice was thick with desperation, and Jax felt his resolve waver. He glanced at the creatures again, their tongues lolling as they struggled to breathe. Jax knew he didn't have much water left in his canteen, just enough to keep him going until he could reach the next spaceport. But the thought of leaving these creatures to die twisted his stomach. With a resigned sigh, he unclipped his canteen from his belt and handed it over. "Here, this is all I've got. Make it count." The alien's slender fingers brushed against his as she accepted the canteen, sending an unexpected jolt of electricity coursing through him. "Thank you," she whispered, her voice trembling with gratitude. Carefully, she poured the precious liquid into the creatures' mouths. Jax watched as life returned to their eyes, their strength slowly revitalizing under the soothing touch of water. Once they had quenched their thirst, she handed the empty canteen back to him, her eyes shining with appreciation. "I am forever in your debt. I am Noria of the Andori. These are my beloved companions, Nyx and Azora." The giant felines, now refreshed, regarded Jax with curious sapphire eyes. One of them, Nyx, approached him, sniffing at his hand tentatively. Jax reached out and stroked the creature's silky fur, marveling at its unearthly softness. "Jax Rogan," he introduced himself, still captivated by Neria's beauty. "What brings a pretty thing like you to a wasteland like Xeno's prime?" Neria's expression darkened as she glanced back at her companions. "My ship crashed here 2 cycles ago. We've been stranded ever since, barely surviving." Her voice quavered as she continued. "Nyx and Azora are not used to such harsh conditions. On Andaria, water is plentiful." A pang of guilt shot through Jax. He knew he should be heading back to his ship, but abandoning Neria and her pets felt like a betrayal. "Listen," he found himself saying, "I've got a ship not far from here. I can give you a lift to the nearest spaceport. Maybe even rustle up some more water for your furry friends." Neria's eyes widened in disbelief. "You would do that for us, but why? You don't even know me." Jax shrugged, trying to play it cool. "Let's just say I've got a soft spot for damsels in distress, especially the blue-skinned, golden-haired variety." A faint blush colored Neria's cheeks, making her even more alluring. I don't know what to say. Thank you, Jax Rogan. Your kindness will not be forgotten." As they began the trek back to Jax's ship, the relentless sun beat down upon them, but he barely noticed the heat. His mind was too preoccupied with thoughts of the enchanting alien woman beside him. There was something regal about her, a sense of nobility that belied her current predicament. Nyx and Azora padded closely, their keen eyes scanning the shifting dunes for any sign of danger. Upon reaching the stellar rogue, Jax felt a pang of apprehension. He wasn't used to having passengers, especially not ones as striking as Narya. As he keyed in the access code, the ship's ramp lowered with a hiss. "Welcome aboard," he said, gesturing for her and her companions to enter. The interior of the ship was cool and inviting, a stark contrast to the harsh desert outside. As they settled in, Jax couldn't shake the feeling that his life had just changed forever. Little did he know, the adventure was only just beginning. As the stellar rogue cruised through the star-studded expanse of space, Jax found himself increasingly drawn to Narya's company. They spent long hours in the cockpit, swapping tales of their adventures and their worlds. Narya spoke of Andaria, a lush planet where water flowed freely, and her people lived in harmony with nature. She described majestic crystal spires of her family's palace, the fragrant gardens where she played as a child, and the shimmering lakes where Nyx and Azora loved to swim. In return, Jax regaled her with stories of his smuggling exploits, narrow escapes, daring heists, and the thrill of living on the edge. With each tale, he felt a connection growing between them, something deeper than mere attraction. But there was a shadow hanging over their budding relationship. Narya had been evasive about the reasons for her journey, and Jax couldn't shake the feeling that she was hiding something. One evening, as they sat in the ship's dimly lit galley, Jax finally broached the subject. "Narya," he said softly, "I know there's something you're not telling me. I can see it in your eyes." Narya stiffened, her gaze dropping to the table. "Jax, I don't know if I can." He reached out, covering her hand with his own. "Hey, whatever it is, you can trust me. I'm here for you." Taking a deep, shuddering breath, Narya met his eyes. "The truth is, I'm not just Narya of the Andari. I'm Princess Narya, heir to the throne of Andaria." Jax's eyes widened, surprise coursing through him, but he remained silent, letting her continue. "I was betrothed to a warlord from a neighboring system, a cruel and ruthless man named Dex Vortex. It was a political arrangement meant to bring stability to our region of space, but I couldn't go through with it. I couldn't condemn myself to a life of misery and oppression." Tears welled in her luminous eyes. "So I ran. I took Nyx and Azora and fled in the dead of night. But Dex's forces pursued us. They shot down my ship over Xeno's Prime, and now I fear they'll never stop hunting me." Jax's heart clenched at the anguish in her voice. He squeezed her hand, trying to convey his support through that simple gesture. "Narya, I had no idea. I'm so sorry you had to go through that." She gave him a watery smile. "You've already done more for me than I could ever repay, Jax. You saved my life and the lives of my darlings. I can't ask you to put yourself in danger for my sake." Jax shook his head, fierce determination rising within him. "You're not asking. I'm offering. I'll be damned if I let some power-hungry bastard lay a finger on you or your pets." Narya's eyes shone with gratitude, and something deeper, something that made Jax's pulse race. "Thank you," she whispered, her voice trembling with emotion. Just then, the ship's proximity alarm blared, shattering the moment. Jax leaped to his feet, his hand instinctively going to the blaster at his hip. "We've got company," he growled, his eyes narrowing on the view screen. A menacing warship had dropped out of hyperspace, its hull bristling with weapons. Jax's blood ran cold as he recognized the insignia emblazoned on its side, the crimson fist of Dex Vortex. "They found us," Narya breathed, her face paling. With the weight of the galaxy bearing down on him, Jax knew he had to act fast. "Strap in," he told her, his voice grim. "Things are about to get bumpy." As he slid into the pilot's seat, Jax braced himself for the battle of his life. With Narya's fate hanging in the balance, he was ready to risk everything to keep her safe, even if it meant sacrificing his own freedom or life. The adventure was far from over. In fact, it was only just beginning. The chase through the stars. The ship shuddered as Jax's fingers flew over the controls, sweat beading on his brow. The proximity alarm blared ominously, its urgent tone a reminder of the danger looming just outside their fragile metal hull. The warship, emblazoned with the notorious insignia of Dex Vortex, loomed large on the view screen, its weapons bristling and ready to fire. Jax's heart raced as he felt the weight of Naria's gaze on him, filled with fear and trust. "Hang on tight," Jax shouted, pushing the throttles forward. The Stellar Row rolled to life, surging ahead as he engaged the engines at full power. They shot forward, racing against the clock and the fury of the warlord hunting them. Naria gripped the co-pilot's seat, her knuckles white, while Nyx and Azora huddled at her feet, their eyes wide with anxiety. The ship lurched as Jax executed a sharp turn, narrowly avoiding the incoming fire from Vortex's ship. The vibrant colors of space blurred outside the viewport as they rocketed through the star-studded expanse. "We need to lose them," Jax muttered, his mind racing. He scanned the star charts, searching for a place to hide, somewhere the warship wouldn't think to look. "There's an asteroid field ahead. If we can weave through it, we might be able to shake them." "Are you sure that's a good idea?" Nuria's voice trembled slightly. "Asteroids can be unpredictable." "Trust me," Jax replied, determination etched into his features. "I've flown through worse." He grinned, his adrenaline pumping. "Besides, I'm a smuggler. Dodging obstacles is what I do best." With that, he pulled the ship into a hard turn, aiming straight for the dense cluster of asteroids ahead. The Stellar Row pitched and rolled as Jax navigated through the tumbling rocks, every instinct honed by years of evasion and survival kicking into overdrive. He felt a rush of exhilaration, his heart pounding not just from fear, but from the thrill of the chase. Behind them, Vortex's warship followed relentlessly, its larger size making it cumbersome as it struggled to keep up. The enemy ship fired again, laser bolts streaking past their viewport, illuminating the vast darkness of space with deadly brilliance. Jax gritted his teeth, focusing all his energy on the controls as he maneuvered through the treacherous terrain. "Stay sharp, Naria," he called, dodging a particularly large asteroid that loomed ahead. "And keep an eye on R6. Naria nodded, her expression a mix of fear and fierce resolve. "I won't let my guard down," she shouted back, her voice steadying Jax's nerves, even amidst the chaos. The Stellar Row dipped and dove through the asteroid field, the rocks towering on either side, each one a potential death trap. Jax's heart raced as he narrowly avoided collisions, the ship vibrating under the strain of his risky maneuvers. He could hear the whirring of the engines, the alarms echoing in the cockpit, but he pushed those thoughts aside, focused solely on the task at hand. Suddenly, the ship jolted violently as a laser hit them, shaking the hull and sending a shiver down Jax's spine. The proximity alarms screamed in protest. "We've lost shields on the starboard side," Noria shouted, her voice slicing through the noise. Jax clenched his jaw. "We can't let them get a clear shot at us again. Keep an eye on those scanners. We need to find a way to outsmart them." As they weaved through the asteroids, Jax's mind was racing. He had to come up with a plan, a way to use the asteroids to their advantage. Just then, he spotted a particularly dense cluster of rocks up ahead. "There, if we can get into that formation, they won't be able to follow us without risking damage." "Are you sure?" Noria asked, her eyes wide. "It's risky." "Riskier than being shot down," Jax quipped, adrenaline sharpening his instincts. "Hold on tight." With a fierce determination, he steered the ship towards the cluster, maneuvering skillfully through the maze of asteroids. The warship behind them blared its own alarms as it struggled to keep pace. The gap between them narrowed dangerously, but Jax refused to back down. He pressed the ship deeper into the labyrinth of rocks. Suddenly, an asteroid collided with Vortex's ship, causing a massive explosion that lit up the dark space around them. Jax glanced back, a surge of satisfaction flooding through him. "Looks like they're not as nimble as we are," he yelled triumphantly. Naria couldn't help but smile, the tension easing momentarily as they pressed on. "Keep going, Jax. We're almost there." But just as they thought they had a chance to escape, another laser blast erupted, striking close enough to rattle their ship. The ship shook violently, warning lights flashing across the console. "Shields down to 30%. Noria yelled, panic creeping into her voice. "We can't afford to get hit again," Jax said, his heart pounding in his chest. "We need a diversion." Thinking quickly, he remembered an old smuggler's trick, a decoy. "Noria, I need you to help me with something. Can you rig the emergency flares? If we launch them, it might buy us a few seconds." Noria nodded, determination igniting her blue eyes. "I can do that." She hurried to the back of the ship, her movements graceful and fluid even under pressure. As she worked, Jax continued to pilot the ship through the asteroid field, skillfully dodging and weaving. The warship was still hot on their tail, but the gap was widening, just slightly. "Okay, Jax, I've got the flares ready," Noria called, her voice steadying him. "Just tell me when to launch." "Now," Jax shouted, pulling the ship into a sharp turn to buy them a few extra moments. He watched as Naria pressed the button, launching the flares into the darkness. They shot out like fireworks, illuminating the space around them in brilliant colors, creating a stunning distraction. The warship's targeting system locked onto the flares, firing off a barrage of laser blasts in an attempt to destroy the decoy. Jax seized the opportunity, pushing the stellar row to maximum speed. "Come on, baby, just a little further," he urged, sweat trickling down his forehead as he concentrated on escaping. As they exited the asteroid field, Jax's heart raced with both fear and exhilaration. Behind them, the warship was momentarily delayed by the flares, providing just enough distance for their escape. But Jax knew this was only a temporary reprieve. Vortex would not give up so easily. "Where to now?" Noria asked, urgency lacing her voice as they broke free from the asteroids and back into open space. Jax glanced at the star charts, scanning for any nearby systems. "There's a small planet not far from here, called Varenthia. It's mostly uninhabited, and I know a few hidden spots where we can lay low." "Let's get there, then," Noria said, her determination shining through. She glanced down at Nyx and Azora, who had calmed slightly, their eyes still darting around as they adjusted to the sudden changes. "We have to keep them safe." With a final glance back at the distant warship, Jax set their course for Varenthia. The stellar rogue surged forward, its engines roaring as they flew into the vastness of space. As they traveled, Jax felt a sense of relief wash over him, but he knew it was fleeting. Vortex would undoubtedly be hunting them, his cruel determination ensuring that they wouldn't be safe for long. But in that moment, Jax allowed himself to enjoy the companionship they had forged amidst chaos. "Tell me more about Andaria," Jax said, trying to keep the mood light. "What's it like there?" Noria's face lit up, the shadows of fear temporarily fading. "It's a beautiful place, filled with lush forests and sparkling rivers. The sunsets are breathtaking, shades of pink and gold that dance across the sky. And our cities are built with harmony in mind, blending seamlessly with nature." "Sounds like paradise," Jax mused, imagining the idyllic landscapes she described. "Maybe one day I'll get to see it for myself." Noria smiled softly, a hint of sadness in her eyes. "You're welcome anytime, Jax. You've shown me kindness when I needed it most. I won't forget that." Jax felt a warmth spread through him at her words, realizing that their bond was deepening. They were no longer just a smuggler and a princess. They were allies united against a common threat, and perhaps something more. As they neared Varenthia, the atmosphere shifted, tension building once more as they prepared to land. Jax focused on their surroundings, spotting a secluded valley where they could hide the ship. "There. We'll land there." Away from prying eyes, he directed, guiding the stellar row down towards the rocky terrain. Once they touched down, the ship settled into a quiet stillness, the engines humming softly as they powered down. Jax turned to Naria, determination set in his features. "We need to fortify our position and come up with a plan. Vortex won't give up easily, and we can't stay here forever." Naria nodded, her expression resolute. "We'll figure it out together, Jax. We're not alone in this." With that, they stepped off the ship into the unfamiliar world of Varanthia, ready to face whatever challenges awaited them. In that moment, Jax felt a flicker of hope ignite within him. They were not just running, they were preparing to fight back against the darkness threatening to engulf them. As they began their preparations, Jax knew one thing for certain: they would not face the storm alone. A refuge in the unknown. The sun hung low on the horizon of Varanthia, casting a golden glow over the rugged terrain as Jax and Naria stepped off the stellar rogue. The air was thick with the scent of earthy vegetation, a stark contrast to the desolate wasteland of Xeno's prime. They stood at the edge of a secluded valley, surrounded by towering cliffs that loomed protectively around them like ancient sentinels. It felt like a hidden sanctuary, a place where they could catch their breath and regroup. "Let's make this place feel more like home," Jax suggested, his gaze sweeping over the area. There was a small clearing nearby, flanked by trees and thick underbrush that would offer them some cover. "We should set up some defenses." Naria nodded, her expression serious. "Agreed. We can use the natural landscape to our advantage. I'll gather some materials for barricades." With that, she moved towards the surrounding trees, her slender figure gracefully weaving between the trunks. Jax watched her for a moment, admiration swelling in his chest. Despite the fear and uncertainty that loomed over them, Naria carried herself with an unyielding spirit. He turned his attention to the ship, checking the compartments for any tools and supplies that might aid in their preparations. As he rummaged through the supplies, he found a collection of old mining equipment. It was dusty but usable, perfect for fortifying their position. He gathered everything he could find: metal sheets, spare wiring, and a few containers of scrap material. With determination, he began to construct makeshift barriers around the ship, creating a perimeter that would provide some protection. Naria returned shortly, her arms filled with branches and vines. "I found some sturdy materials," she said, her voice brightening. "We can use these to camouflage the ship." "Great thinking," Jax replied, moving to help her. Together, they wove the branches and vines around the stellar rogue, ensuring it blended into the landscape. As they worked side by side, laughter occasionally broke through the tension, lightening their spirits amidst the looming threat of vortex. With the barrier set, they took a moment to rest, leaning against the ship and catching their breath. The sun dipped lower, and the colors of the sky transformed into a vibrant tapestry of oranges, pinks, and purples. "Your planet sounds beautiful," Jax remarked, glancing sideways at Naria, who was lost in thought, her eyes reflecting the colors of the sunset. Naria sighed softly. "It is. Andaria is a paradise, but it's more than just the beauty. It's the connection to nature, the way our people live in harmony with the land. We have festivals that celebrate the changing seasons, and the music, it's a part of our soul." Jax smiled, picturing the idyllic life she described. "I'd love to experience that one day," he said, imagining the lush landscapes and joyous celebrations of Andaria. "But for now, we need to focus on the present." "Right," Naria agreed, her expression shifting back to seriousness. "What's our next move?" "We need to gather intelligence. Vortex won't just give up. He'll be looking for us," Jax replied, his mind racing with possibilities. "I'll take a scout around the valley. If there are any nearby settlements or outposts, I can find out what the locals know about him." Naria frowned slightly, concern flickering in her eyes. "What if something happens to you? I can't bear the thought of losing you after all we've been through." Jax placed a reassuring hand on her shoulder. "I'll be careful. I'm not going to take unnecessary risks. And besides," he added with a wink, "I'm a smuggler. Getting in and out undetected is kind of my specialty." Naria smiled reluctantly, but the worry didn't fully leave her face. Just promise me you'll come back safe. I can't face this without you." "I promise," Jack said, his tone earnest. He turned to gather a few supplies: a small blaster, some rations, and a handheld communicator. "I'll be back before you know it." As Jax set out into the wilderness, he felt a mixture of excitement and anxiety. The landscape of Varinthia was lush and alive, filled with the sounds of chirping creatures and rustling leaves. It was a far cry from the desolation of Xeno's prime, but danger could lurk anywhere, especially with Vortex on their tail. He moved quietly, staying low to the ground and keeping to the shadows of the trees. Jax's senses were heightened, each crack of a twig or rustle of foliage setting him on edge. He wasn't just scouting for himself, he was protecting Naria and her pets, and the weight of that responsibility pressed heavily on his shoulders. After some time, he reached the outskirts of a small settlement nestled in a natural clearing. The buildings were modest but well kept, made from local materials that blended with the environment. Jax crouched behind a large rock, peering into the settlement to observe the inhabitants. The people seemed friendly, engaged in everyday tasks. Some were tending to gardens, while others were trading goods in the center square. He noticed a group of individuals clustered around a bulletin board, exchanging news and gossip. This could be his chance to gather information on Vortex. Slowly, Jax moved closer, staying out of sight. He listened intently, hoping to catch snippets of conversation. "Did you hear about the warlord looking for that princess?" one man said, his voice thick with concern. "Yeah, they say she's hiding somewhere nearby," another replied. "That Vortex won't stop until he finds her." Jax felt a chill run down his spine. They were already aware of Naria's presence. He had to act fast. He edged closer to the group, carefully positioning himself where he could hear more without being seen. "I heard he's been sending out scouts to search every inch of this valley," a woman chimed in, her tone brave. "If they find her, it'll be bad for everyone." "Maybe we should warn the others," the man suggested, worry etched on his face. Jax's heart raced. The situation was more dire than he had anticipated. He had to get this information back to Naria. If Vortex's men were already searching the valley, they needed to relocate, and fast. As he turned to leave, a sudden noise caught his attention. A group of armed thugs emerged from the tree line, clad in black armor that gleamed ominously under the fading sun. Jax's stomach dropped. Vortex had already sent scouts, and they were closing in. He quickly retreated, staying low and moving silently back through the woods. His heart pounded in his chest as he navigated the underbrush, adrenaline fueling his speed. The last thing he wanted was to lead them back to Naria. Once he reached the clearing where the Stellar Row was parked, he burst through the trees, breathless and panicked. Naria looked up, her expression shifting from relief to alarm as she took in his disheveled state. "Jax, what happened?" she asked, rushing to him. "We need to move. Vortex's men are searching the valley," he said, urgency in his voice. "They know you're here, and they're already sending scouts." Naria's eyes widened in fear. "What do we do?" "First, we have to stay calm. We need to gather everything we can carry and find a more secure location," Jax replied, his mind racing. "There's a cave system a few miles from here. It might give us the cover we need until we can figure out our next move." "Okay," Naria said, her determination returning. "Let's pack up quickly." They sprang into action, gathering supplies and securing their ship. Jax's heart raced as they worked, the urgency of their situation fueling their movements. Nyx and Azora watched with wide eyes, sensing the tension in the air. Once everything was packed, Jax led Naria and the pets toward the cave system he remembered. The terrain was rugged and challenging, but the adrenaline pushed them forward. They navigated through dense foliage, over rocky outcrops, and finally reached the mouth of the cave. It was dark inside, but the cool air was a welcome relief from the heat outside. They moved deeper into the cave, finding a spacious chamber where they could catch their breath. "Is this safe?" Naria asked, her voice echoing slightly in the stillness. "For now, yes. We just need to keep our voices down, Jax replied, scanning the shadows for any sign of danger. Let's set up a lookout. As they settled in, Jax could feel the weight of their circumstances pressing down on them. Vortex was relentless, and now they were truly in the crosshairs. What if they find us here? Naria asked, her voice barely above a whisper. We'll deal with it when it comes, Jax assured her, though the uncertainty gnawed at him. For now, we need to stay alert and think of a plan. As night fell outside, the cave felt more like a sanctuary than a prison. Jax lit a small fire, its flickering glow illuminating their faces. Naria curled up next to him, her golden hair shimmering in the light as she gazed into the flames. I'm so grateful you're here, Jax, she said softly, breaking the silence. I don't know what I would do without you. Jax felt a warmth in his chest at her words. We're in this together, Naria. I won't let anything happen to you. They sat in companionable silence, the crackling of the fire filling the space as they shared stories about their pasts, dreams, and fears. Naria spoke of her childhood on Andaria, her laughter echoing in the cave as she recalled playful moments with her friends. Jax, in turn, recounted tales of daring escapes and narrow misses in the smuggling world, his voice filled with bravado. But even as they exchanged laughter and warmth, a cloud of tension hung over them. They both knew that the real threat was still out there, lurking just beyond the cave's entrance. As the fire burned low, Jax finally broke the silence. I need to rest, but I'll take the first watch. No, let me, Naria insisted. You've been through a lot today. You need to recharge. Are you sure? Jax asked, concern lacing his tone. I can handle it, she said firmly. I want to protect you too. With a reluctant nod, Jax settled down, trusting her judgment. As he closed his eyes, exhaustion washed over him, the weight of their situation pressing down on him. He could feel Naria's presence beside him, a comforting reminder that they were in this together. But even as he drifted off to sleep, a sense of foreboding lingered in the back of his mind. Vortex was hunting them, and Jax knew it was only a matter of time before the next encounter. As dreams faded into darkness, the only thing he could hold onto was the hope that together they could face whatever came next. Shadows of the past. The soft crackling of the fire was the only sound breaking the stillness of the cave as Jax slipped into a restless sleep. He dreamed of distant stars and alien landscapes, visions of Andaria's lush gardens, mingling with memories of narrow escapes and perilous adventures. But the dreams soon twisted into nightmares, the imposing silhouette of Dex Vortex looming large over him, a reminder of the danger that was ever present, a constant threat against their newfound camaraderie. When Jax awoke, the cave was cloaked in darkness, the flickering embers of their fire casting eerie shadows on the walls. He blinked, disoriented, momentarily forgetting where he was until he heard a soft voice nearby. Naria, he called out, his heart racing as he sat up. The cool air of the cave rushed over him, snapping him fully awake. I'm here, she replied softly, emerging from the shadows. Everything is quiet. Jax relaxed slightly, relieved to see her silhouette against the dim light. How long have I been out? Just a couple of hours, Naria said, her blue skin glowing faintly in the darkness. You needed the rest. I'll wake you if anything happens. He rubbed the sleep from his eyes and leaned back against the cool rock. Thanks for keeping watch. But let's switch. I need to keep my wits about me. Naria nodded, her gaze steady. All right, but let's stay close to the fire. I can't help but feel there's something lurking out there. With the darkness pressing in around them, Jax took his place on guard, his senses sharpened as he stared into the flickering flames. He thought back to the rumors he'd overheard in the settlement, how Vortex's men were scouring the valley for Naria. Each moment felt like a ticking clock, and Jax was painfully aware that time was not on their side. Naria, he began, breaking the silence. Tell me more about your home, about Andaria. I want to know what I'm fighting for. She smiled softly, her eyes reflecting the glow of the fire. Andaria is beautiful. It's a planet filled with life and color. The crystal palaces, where my family resides, are made of shimmering stones that catch the light of our sun. The gardens are filled with fragrant flowers, and the rivers are clear and pure. It's a place where my people thrive, and every year we celebrate the Festival of Water, honoring the gift of life that sustains us. Festival of Water? Sounds like a good time, Jax replied, captivated by her words. What's it like? It's filled with laughter, music, and dancing, Noria said, her voice filled with nostalgia. Everyone comes together to celebrate our bond with nature. We release flowers into the rivers as offerings, and the whole planet seems to light up with joy. But now I fear that such celebrations may never happen again, not with Vortex after me. Don't think like that, Jax said firmly, a resolve hardening within him. We'll find a way to stop him. You deserve to go home and reclaim your life. I hope so, she whispered, her gaze distant. But there's something else. I wasn't just running from a marriage. I was also running from my responsibilities. I don't want to be a pawn in someone else's game. Jax studied her, understanding dawning. You feel trapped, don't you? Like your life isn't your own. Noria nodded, her expression pained. I was raised to be a ruler, to make sacrifices for the good of my people, but I want to live to make my own choices. And now I fear that the very people I was meant to protect may come to harm because of me. Stop it right there, Jax said, his voice firm. You're not to blame for Vortex's actions. You made a choice for yourself, and that takes strength. He's the one who's wrong in this situation. A flicker of hope ignited in Naria's eyes, and she smiled, gratitude warming her expression. Thank you, Jax. Your belief in me means more than you know. As they exchanged words, a low rumble echoed through the cave, momentarily silencing their conversation. Jax tensed, his instincts on high alert. Did you hear that? Yes, Noria said, her voice barely above a whisper. The noise grew louder, reverberating through the walls, and Jax instinctively reached for his blaster, tension coursing through his body. Stay close, he instructed, moving toward the mouth of the cave to peer outside. The night air was still, but the sounds of rustling grew more pronounced. Jax's heart raced as he scanned the surroundings, and then he caught sight of movement just beyond the tree line. Shadows flitted between the trees, and he quickly grabbed the remaining branches they had gathered and pushed them in front of the ship, doing his best to obscure it from view. Noria helped, her movements fluid and focused. The weight of their fear hung heavily as they worked, knowing that their safety depended on this moment. Once they finished, Jax turned to Naria. We should stay quiet and wait. If they come this way, we'll need to be ready. Naria nodded, her face set with determination. They huddled in the shadows, the flickering embers of their fire behind them, casting an almost ethereal glow. Jax kept his blaster ready, his heart pounding in rhythm with the sounds of the night. The rustling grew louder as a group of figures approached the cave. Jax strained to hear their voices, hoping to glean any information that could help them. Split up, one of the men ordered, his voice gruff. Search the area. Vortex wants that princess alive. We can't let her escape. Jax's breath hitched. They were indeed hunting for Naria. He glanced at her, fear etched on her features, and squeezed her hand reassuringly. Move quietly, another man warned. If she's hiding here, we need to be cautious. The last thing we want is to spook her. Jax's heart raced as the men moved closer, their silhouettes dark against the faint light of the stars. They were scanning the area, their movements methodical and relentless. Jax's grip tightened on his blaster, adrenaline coursing through his veins. Remember the plan, Jax whispered to Naria. If they find us, we make a run for it. Head for the trees. Got it, she replied, her voice steady even as fear lurked beneath the surface. Just then, one of the men spotted their fire, and he turned towards the cave, his eyes narrowing. There's a fire. Get close. Search the cave. Panic surged through Jax. Now, he hissed, and they sprang into action, racing toward the back of the cave. Nyx and Azora moved with a grace that belied their size, staying close to Narya as she hurried away from the entrance. Jax led them deeper into the shadows, his mind racing for an escape route. They reached a narrow tunnel leading further into the cave, and Jax hesitated for only a moment before pushing forward. This way, we might be able to find a way out. The darkness enveloped them, the air cooler as they moved deeper into the cave. Jax could hear the voices of Vortex's men growing louder, echoing off the stone walls. "They're close," one of the men shouted, panic creeping into his voice. "We have to find them before they slip away." Jax and Narya pressed forward, the sound of footsteps growing louder behind them. Jax could feel his heart pounding in his chest, each thud echoing his desperation. "Which way?" Narya asked, glancing back as the noise drew nearer. "I don't know. Just keep moving," Jax urged, focusing on finding a way out. As they hurried through the winding tunnel, Jax felt a rush of anxiety. The walls seemed to close in around them, and he could hear Narya's breath quickening. "I can't go back, Jax. I can't face him again." "You won't have to," Jax promised, determination surging through him. "We'll find a way out of this. I won't let him take you." Finally, the tunnel opened up into a larger chamber, and Jax paused, scanning the space for potential exits. The air was stale, and he could hear water dripping from the ceiling, but there was no time to dwell on their surroundings. "There," he shouted, spotting a narrow passageway leading upward. "That looks like a way out." "Let's go," Narya said, urgency fueling her movements as they darted toward the passage. They climbed through the narrow opening, Jax pushing ahead to create space for Narya and the pets. As they reached the top of the passage, they found themselves outside in the cool night air, a sliver of moonlight illuminating their escape route. Jax glanced around, scanning the area for any signs of danger. "We need to keep moving," he urged, his voice low. "They could be right behind us." They rushed into the cover of the trees, the underbrush crackling under their feet as they pushed deeper into the forest. Jax felt the weight of Narya's hand in his, a reminder of their bond and the fight they were undertaking together. "Where do we go now?" Narya asked, glancing around as they moved. "There's a stream nearby. It'll mask our scent," Jax said, his instincts guiding him. "We can find a place to hide until morning." As they hurried through the underbrush, Jax could hear the distant voices of Vortex's men calling to each other, their search continuing. The night felt alive with danger, but Jax was determined to protect Narya and her companions. Finally, they reached the bank of a clear stream, the water flowing gently under the moonlight. Jax quickly scanned the area for a hiding spot and spotted a cluster of bushes that could provide them with some cover. "Over there," he pointed. They ducked into the bushes, the sound of the stream drowning out their movements. Jax could feel his heart racing, and he held his breath, straining to hear any signs of their pursuers. The voices of Vortex's men grew louder, echoing through the trees as they searched the area. "Spit up again. They can't have gone far," one of them shouted, that urgency palpable. Jax's grip tightened around his blaster, his resolve hardening. They would not find Narya. He wouldn't let them. As the men drew closer, Jax leaned closer to Narya, their faces nearly touching as they waited in silence. "Stay quiet," he whispered, his voice low and steady. Narya nodded, her eyes wide as she held her breath. They remained still, the sound of their heartbeat echoing in the stillness as they listened to the footsteps approaching. "Check the bushes," one of the men ordered. "They can't hide forever." Panic surged through Jax, but he forced himself to remain calm. He would protect her, he had to. Suddenly, one of the men pushed through the brush near their hiding spot, peering into the shadows. Jax's heart raced as he readied his blaster, prepared to fight if necessary. But just as the man reached out, another figure called from a distance, momentarily distracting him. "Over here. I found something," the voice shouted, and the man hesitated, glancing back. Jax took the opportunity to grip Narya's hand tighter, signaling her to stay quiet. They remained hidden as the man turned to follow his companion, leaving the area momentarily unguarded. Once they were certain the coast was clear, Jax breathed a sigh of relief, feeling the tension slowly release from his body. "We need to get moving before they regroup," he said, glancing at Naria. "Are you ready?" Naria nodded, her determination renewed. "Let's go." They slipped out from their hiding spot and quickly made their way along the bank of the stream, sticking to the shadows of the trees. As they moved, Jax couldn't shake the feeling of unease. The hunt was far from over, but he couldn't dwell on that now. Together, they continued onward, a team bound by courage and resilience, prepared to face whatever challenges lay ahead. Each step brought them closer to safety, but the shadow of Deck's vortex still loomed large, and they knew the fight was far from finished. Into the heart of danger. The night air was crisp and filled with the sounds of nocturnal creatures as Jax and Naria moved stealthily along the bank of the stream. The moonlight danced on the surface of the water, casting shimmering reflections that seemed to mock their desperate situation. Each step they took felt heavy with the weight of their circumstances, but the urgency of their escape pushed them onward. "Jax, do you think they'll follow us?" Naria asked, glancing over her shoulder as they navigated through the underbrush. Her voice was laced with anxiety, and Jax could see the fear lingering in her expressive eyes. "They might," he replied, keeping his voice low. "But we have the advantage of the terrain. The stream should help mask our scent, and if we stay alert, we'll find a place to lie low until we can formulate a plan." Naria nodded, though Jax could sense her unease. He squeezed her hand reassuringly, knowing that every moment spent in the shadows heightened their chances of discovery. As they moved deeper into the forest, the sounds of the night began to fade. They ventured further from the stream, climbing a gentle slope that led to a dense thicket of trees. Jack's instincts told him this was the right way. The more isolated they became, the safer they'd be from prying eyes. After several minutes of cautious movement, they came across a small clearing nestled between the trees. The moonlight poured into the area, revealing an ancient stone structure partially overgrown with vines. It looked like a long-forgotten temple or shrine, its weathered stones bearing the scars of time. "This could be a good hiding spot," Jax suggested, gesturing toward the ruins. "Let's check it out." Naria hesitated for a moment, her eyes scanning the shadows around them. "It feels eerie." "Eerie or not, we can't keep wandering around in the open," Jax replied, moving toward the entrance of the stone structure. "Stay close." Inside, the air was cool and filled with the scent of damp earth. They stepped carefully through the entrance, their footsteps echoing softly against the stone floor. The walls were adorned with intricate carvings, depicting scenes of nature and celestial bodies, a reminder of the world's ancient beauty. "Wow, look at this," Naria whispered, her eyes wide as she traced a finger over the carvings. "It's beautiful." "Yeah, it is," Jax agreed, momentarily distracted by the artistry. But they didn't have time to linger. He could feel the urgency of their situation pressing down on him. "We should find a spot to rest and gather our thoughts." As they explored the structure, they discovered a small alcove at the back, partially hidden by overgrown foliage. It seemed like the perfect place to hide, offering a sense of security amidst the uncertainty. "Here," Jax said, leading Naria into the alcove. "We can rest here for a bit and plan our next move." Naria settled against the cool stone wall, her body visibly relaxing as the tension began to ease. "What do we do now?" she asked, her voice softening as she glanced at him. "First, we need to assess our options," Jax replied, leaning back against the wall. "We can't stay here forever, but we also can't rush into a situation we're not prepared for." Naria nodded, her brow furrowed in thought. "Vortex will send more men after us, especially if they know we're in the area. We need to find a way to get ahead of them." "Agreed. We should also try to find some locals who can help us," Jax suggested, recalling the people he had seen in the settlement. "Maybe someone there knows more about Vortex operations or can offer assistance." Do you think they'll trust us? Noria asked, doubt creeping into her voice. I mean, with everything that's happening. We won't know unless we try, Jax replied, determination flaring within him. But we have to be cautious. If Vortex's men have been asking questions, we can't let anyone know who you really are until we're sure it's safe. Noria bit her lip, a hint of anxiety clouding her features. I wish I didn't have to hide. I'm not just a princess. I want to be seen as more than that. Jax met her gaze, the sincerity in her words resonating deeply. You're more than just a title, Noria. You're strong and capable. And right now, your strength is what will get us through this. Her expression softened, and she smiled at him, the warmth of their bond shining through the fear. Thank you for believing in me. Before Jax could respond, a low rumble echoed from outside the structure, making the ground beneath them tremble slightly. He exchanged worried glances with Noria, his instincts screaming at him to remain alert. Did you hear that? He whispered, straining to listen. Yes, she replied, her voice barely above a whisper. What do you think it is? Jax peered through a gap in the stone, his heart racing. I don't know, but we need to stay quiet and out of sight. As they waited in the alcove, the rumbling grew louder, and Jax could make out the sound of heavy footsteps approaching. His pulse quickened as he realized Vortex's men were drawing closer, the tension in the air thickening. They're searching for us, Jax murmured, his eyes wide with determination. We need to move, and quickly. Nuria's eyes mirrored his urgency. What should we do? We'll sneak out the back and make our way through the forest to that settlement I saw earlier. If we can reach it without being spotted, we might be able to gather the information we need, he instructed. All right, Noria replied, steeling herself for the challenge ahead. They crept to the rear of the alcove, Jax leading the way as they slipped through a narrow opening that led to the outside. The moonlight greeted them, but the shadows of the trees quickly swallowed them up as they moved cautiously through the underbrush. As they ventured deeper into the woods, Jax's heart raced with every rustle and snap of branches, the sounds of the men's voices growing fainter behind them. They kept their pace steady, relying on the forest to cloak their movements. After a few minutes of navigating through the dense foliage, they reached the edge of the forest and caught sight of the small settlement in the distance. The warm glow of lights flickered through the trees, a beacon of hope amidst the uncertainty. There it is, Jax said, pointing towards the settlement. We need to approach cautiously. Let's keep to the shadows and avoid being seen. Noria nodded, her determination renewed. Together, they made their way toward the settlement, the vibrant sounds of life growing louder as they drew closer. Jax's senses were on high alert, aware that they were still in danger. As they reached the outskirts of the settlement, Jax spotted a group of people gathered around a fire, sharing stories and laughter. It was a stark contrast to the fear that had consumed them just moments before. Should we approach? Noria asked, her voice tense with uncertainty. Let's hang back for a moment and observe, Jax replied, crouching behind a nearby tree. We need to gauge their reaction. They watched as the people interacted, noticing that the mood was light-hearted despite the dark of night. Jax felt a flicker of hope. Perhaps they could find allies here after all. Just then, a figure emerged from the crowd, a tall man with a rugged appearance and a commanding presence. He stood confidently, his voice resonating as he spoke to the group. Listen up, everyone. We have to stay vigilant. Rumors are spreading about a warlord searching for someone in these parts. We can't let fear control us. Jax exchanged a glance with Noria. This could be our chance. If he knows about Vortex, he might be able to help us. They waited as the man continued to address the crowd, speaking passionately about community and the strength of their people. Jax felt a connection to the man's words, a reminder that there was more to life than fear and oppression. Let's approach, Jax decided, leading Noria forward cautiously. We need to introduce ourselves and explain our situation. As they stepped into the firelight, the man turned to them, his eyes narrowing as he assessed their presence. Who are you two? What brings you to our settlement at this hour? Jax took a deep breath, summoning his confidence. I'm Jax Rogan, and this is Naria. We're travelers in need of assistance. We've been chased by a warlord named Dex Vortex, and we're hoping to find refuge here. The man's expression shifted from suspicion to curiosity. Vortex, you say? We've heard whispers about him. What do you know? We escaped from his men, Jax explained, his voice steady. We need information, anything that can help us evade him and get to safety. The man studied them for a moment, his gaze piercing but thoughtful. We don't take kindly to outsiders without proof of their intentions, but I sense you're telling the truth. Come sit with us. We need to know more about your situation. Relief washed over Jax as they joined the group, settling near the fire. Noria looked at him, her expression a mixture of gratitude and hope. They shared their story, recounting their harrowing escape and the dangers that lay ahead. As they spoke, the man introduced himself as Kale, a leader among the settlement's residents. He listened intently, nodding as they recounted their plight. You're brave to face Vortex and his men, he said, his voice firm. But you're not alone. We will help you in any way we can. A sense of camaraderie began to form among the group, the weight of their fears lifting as they shared strategies for dealing with Vortex. Jax felt a renewed sense of purpose as they discussed the best routes for escape and potential allies they could reach out to. But just as they were beginning to formulate a plan, the night was shattered by the distant sound of shouts and the clattering of boots against the ground. Jax's heart sank as he recognized the unmistakable sounds of Vortex men approaching. They found us, he shouted, urgency flooding his voice. We need to move now. The group erupted into action, panic setting in as they scrambled to gather their belongings. Kale moved with purpose, rallying his people. Stay together. We'll form a line to defend our home. Jax turned to Naria, determination etched on his features. We have to fight back. We can't let them take you. Naria nodded, her eyes burning with resolve. I'm ready, Jax. Let's do this together. As they prepared for the oncoming confrontation, Jax could feel the adrenaline coursing through his veins. This was it, the moment they had been preparing for. No longer were they just trying to evade Vortex, they were standing up to him. The settlement was alive with movement as residents armed themselves, forming a defensive perimeter. Jax felt a surge of pride at their bravery, knowing that they were not alone in this fight. Together, they would face the darkness threatening to consume them. As the sounds of Vortex's men grew closer, Jax took a deep breath, readying himself for the battle ahead. They would protect what mattered most, and in that moment, he knew they would fight not just for survival, but for a future filled with hope.